Okay, well, firstly, thank you for allowing me to talk today and being here. It's greatly appreciated. Without sounding too much like being at the Oscars, I just want to thank the team for inviting me, and also this lovely little cufflings that I've been given for appearing today, so greatly appreciated. Thank you. My name is Ben. I served for a number of years in the Royal Air Force for my sins, but like every good story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning of my story was that I was born in Blackpool and raised in Fleetwood. Then what happened was, at 3 months old, I was told, or my parents were told, that basically I had whooping cough. My lungs were so badly damaged, apparently, that I would never do any physical activity for the rest of my life. Well, as you quite clearly see, we soon put that one to bed. Then, on top of that, at the age of 6, I found out, I say at the age of 6, I actually found out in my adult life that it had been kept from me, that at the age of 6 I was actually highlighted and diagnosed with having autism and high needs. However, back then, they didn't know as much about it back then as they do now. So it was kept off my medical records, and I went through my entire aviation career, both in the Air Force and a flight attendant for British Airways, having absolutely no idea that I was on the spectrum. And I was always wondering why I was such an interesting child growing up. When I got to sort of pre-teens and teens, what happened was I got this love of sport, okay? I tell you this bit now, not for you to make me feel sorry for me, but I did get a lot of bullying as a child at school. I never really fitted in at all. I didn't like football, still don't. I'm not a big drinker. And their idea at teenage years, growing up in the small fishing town of Fleetwood, was camping out at the local boating lake, drinking White Lightning and basically smoking and all that sort of stuff. That wasn't me, you know. So on Monday nights and Wednesday nights, during my teenage years, I would be going to my local athletics club on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I would then be going to Taekwondo club and then run down the street to where then I would get dressed in my Air Training Corps uniform and was there at the Air Training Corps. So what happened? Well, basically, having joined the Air Training Corps at the age of 13, I got invited to the air show at Blackpool. Now, I don't know if anybody here has visited Blackpool recently, or especially been to the air show. It's the oldest air show in Great Britain, independent, and back then, the air show, unlike now, if you go now, it's actually over the sea between North and Central Pier. Back then, it was actually at the airfield itself. So I'm stood there at the side of the runway, and I'm thinking to myself, this is an amazing atmosphere. I'm stood there, none of my cadet friends were around me, and the Tornado at the end of the runway had its reverse buckets on, engines full blast. I felt the power in my chest. I still get spine tingles when I talk about it now. And then basically, it took its reverse buckets off, flew down the runway, straight up vertical, and the power, it felt like the earth had just shattered. And I was like, right, that's me, I want to be part of that. So growing up in high school, what happened was I was struggling quite a lot with English and maths, but I managed to power on through. And the only GCSE I got at the time was IT. How I did that, God only knows, because I'm useless at technology. I then joined the Royal Air Force after leaving sixth form, and basically I spent a year. And I got a knock on the door by my then sergeant, who said, "Constable, office now." I was like, okay, right. He said, "We want you to go away and get a little bit of life experience." So in other words, I was a big child. I then decided that was the best course of action because I'd been given a role which I really did not like. I was a clerk cashier at the start. And for somebody who at the time didn't know but do now, who was on the spectrum and dyslexic, I always wondered why I struggled. So I spent a bit of time away from the Air Force, and then what happened was I went and got a job where I was a removal man and basically got a big contract for the British Army. We went over to Germany, which is absolutely wonderful because Germany is one of those places that is really, really friendly, and it helped that I spoke a bit of the language as well. So I spent a year getting a little bit of experience in life, went back into the Air Force, and then I got the opportunity to become telecommunications. Again, I don't know why. It was one of those trades. I had no interest in computers, and I had a really bad day. And like I did growing up through my teenage years, whenever I had a bad day, what I would do was get my sports gear on and go for a run. And this was one of those things as well. I joined the RAF athletics team in the most weird and wonderful way, and it's pretty much why I'm standing in front of you here today. So I'm just going to briefly touch on why it is and how that happened, because it adds context to why I'm here now. So during basic training at RAF Halton, what happened was that because of my air cadet background and already been in the Royal Air Force once before, they gave me the coveted role of being what they call senior man, or as we call it in military terms, the gopher. In other words, if the sergeant was unhappy with you, he would go for you. If the flight lieutenant was unhappy with you, she would go for me, and I would then go for all the other flight. So this one particular day, I had a really bad day, got my running gear on, and unbeknownst to me, there were some standing orders that I weren't allowed to do any physical activity that the RAF hadn't set themselves, and there's a pathway that recruits were not allowed to go down. Needless to say, I didn't know anything about that, and I broke the standing orders, and then got caught by the corporal, who was going to then take me on a PTI session the next day. So what happened was, I went to the RAF Halton PT session the next day, and the corporal shouts out, "Constable, senior man, front and centre." Okay, got out. "You're going to keep up with me. If you fall behind, this weekend, as you know, is bank holiday weekend, will be cancelled." So I then went back into the flight, and at which point got whispered sweet nothings to my ear by the rest of the flight. And then basically the PT session started. Now I had a secret weapon. I'd kept my mouth shut about the fact that 4 weeks before doing what I've just told you, I'd actually just completed this, the London Marathon. So I was by now somewhat of a seasoned runner. I then carried on. It was a 5-mile run or thereabouts. I then got to 2 miles and said to the corporal, as a cheeky 19-year-old, "Corporal, all due respect, can we run a bit faster?" To which he basically turned around to me and said, "Are you being cheeky?" Insert swear word. And basically what happened then was I went, no, anybody, keen runners that are in the audience will tell you, if you're used to running at a certain pace, your body gets used to it quite quickly. So what happens is then, I was running at a pace that was uncomfortable for me, and I then said, right, I'll tell you what, let's put some skin in the game, Corporal. If I beat you, okay, you've got to buy everybody in the flight around the drinks at pass-out parade. And he said, if I beat you, he said, what I'm going to do is I want to cancel next weekend's leave as well. Needless to say, I went off, got the course record, and as it happened, shot past who was then a squadron leader in charge of the RAF athletics team. So basically what happened then was basic training turned up. I proudly passed out, and what happened was the squadron leader then came to me and my parents and my sister. "Constable, you're going to be reporting to me at RAF Cosford, and you're going to be training at Alexander Stadium with the Great Britain squad and also the RAF athletics team." Needless to say, I started my career with a bit of a bang. Then what happened was at RAF Halton, I went to RAF Cosford, where I failed all the telecommunications exams. I was having a really bad day, and I got on training on a Wednesday, because on a Wednesday in the RAF, what they do is they allow you to spend the afternoon doing sports. If you want to go to the gym, swimming, they allow you to do that. So the squadron leader that I'd gone past, who was now based at Cosford, by sheer coincidence, who's now a wing commander, said, "Why don't you come down and spend a bit of time with us down in the medical unit? I'm a doctor, junior, and basically it might be that you fit in with us." So that's what I did. I got permission to leave the telecommunication trade, went over to the medical unit, and then basically fell in love with the world of medicine. As it happens right now, I am in the process of finishing my degree in BSc Honours in adult nursing, and this year I should be graduating as an adult nurse. And that was thanks to my career setting off within the Royal Air Force. So basically, having left the Royal Air Force, what then happened was I went on to reserve, and what they call active reserve. So basically, I had to phone up the RAF and let them know where I was going, what I was doing pretty much once a month, and they would then send me nice and kindly, £20 a month, and so that they knew where I was. So I then did a bit of travelling, went to the Isle of Man, where I then became a flight attendant for British Airways, and whilst I was out there, my grandfather sadly passed away. He was an amazing man, and quite a lot of my inspiration came from him, as well as other members of my family. What then happened was I made the decision to come back and then look after my grandma. My grandma had a condition, what is known as COPD. What that stands for is coronary obstructive pulmonary disease, which basically, for the people that aren't aware, it's actually just stripping away the lung lining. And it's very painful, and people can be put on oxygen and puriated air. And it was heartbreaking watching my grandma slowly pass away in front of me. I looked after her for a number of years, and basically then, sadly, the inevitable happened. She then passed away, contracting pneumonia brought on by the care home that unfortunately we had no option but to put her in. And what happened was then 3 days after the death, I then get a letter from the local council telling me that I had to vacate the premises. Needless to say, my headspace wasn't exactly in the brightest of places back then. I've just lost my grandma, I've now got no job, and basically I had nowhere to turn. I then said to my parents, do you mind if I move in with you? The response, unfortunately, was no. And the reason for that is not to blame my parents. I don't know if anybody remembers the DBS system back when it first got invented. Basically, that checks if you've got a criminal record. My parents were Ofsted registered childminders, and they weren't allowed anybody on the premises who didn't have a DBS. Back then, if you applied for a DBS, what would happen is that you would end up waiting anywhere between 6 to 12 months to actually get a DBS to come through. So what then happened was I then was officially NFA, non-fixed abode. I then ended up staying at a friend's house who, as it happens, sadly, had his own medical issues with mental health conditions. One night, I was asleep in bed, only to wake up with him standing at the end of my bed with a kitchen implement. Needless to say, that freaked me out. I had to shout his son to come and grab him. It turned out he was then sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and it turned out he had undiagnosed multiple personality disorder. So, as you can appreciate, I decided then, okay, I'm going to go and live with a friend of mine across the road. I then moved across the road, and he then turned around to me and said, Ben, unfortunately, due to the Housing Association rules, I'm allowing you to stay, but I can't allow you to stay overnight. The best thing I can do is give you a tent. So that's what he did. He gave me a tent. I then did stealth camping on the local golf course, where I stayed in a tent for several weeks. Now, at this point, I'm at my lowest. The only thing that I had to the outside world was, remember the old Nokia that you used to play Snake on, and you drop it and the concrete would break? Basically, I had one of them. I got this random phone call of an ad hoc job that I've now got. And when I say ad hoc, it was really, truly ad hoc. 1 minute I could be working, literally 2 days, and I could wait for several weeks before I got any more work. And it was a 0 hours contract. So to say that I was not in exactly a great financial place is an understatement. Then what happened was I got this phone call, and he said, listen, Ben, we've got you some work. Would you like to come down? Yeah, great. So I got my medical gear out of storage, whereby then what happened was that I decided to get my gear and start walking from where I was living at the time in Fleetwood to then start walking to Preston. Now, I don't know if anybody's from around that area or knows that area. That is some way. It's about 18 to 19 miles. So a friend of mine who was a bus driver randomly picked me up. I explained to him the story, what I've just told yourselves. What then happened was he said, right, I'm finishing my shift driving this bus. What time are you finishing work at? I said, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said, right, okay, right. Makes a phone call to his bosses, gets permission to come and pick me up, gets a day off from work. He says, right, Ben, he says, you're staying with me now until we get this sorted. Okay, I said, I'm not going to argue. And those of you that know, it's not wise to argue with somebody who's been in multiple wars and who's ex-army. And also the boxing champion of the army as well. So I said, yeah, okay, Steve, not going to argue. You're in charge. Crack on. What we did then the following day, he got a brew, sat me down and said, right, way forward, what we're going to do. I have no idea. I'm in your capable hands. I have no idea what to do. What then happened was he reached out to the Royal Air Force Benevolent Fund and the Royal Air Force Association, and then they turned around and helped me a little bit, and they went, right, what we need you to do is get in contact with the Royal British Legion. And I said, okay, so I did. They then sent out a caseworker. I told them everything that had gone on, even in more greater detail than what I've told you lovely people. And basically what happened then was this caseworker said, right, Ben, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, I have a passion for sport. And I went, well, yeah, we noticed you've got a sports degree. What do you want to do with it? I want to become a personal trainer. And he said, well, okay, how much is the course? I said, I can't afford it. The cheapest one I'm looking at here at the moment is £2,500. Right, yeah, we've got that, we can do that. Pardon? He said, yeah, we can pay you what? We can pay you for that, that's not a problem. I said, well, what about getting down there? It's in Manchester. I don't drive. Oh, yeah, we can pay you that, no problem. Okay. And he said, where are you living? Now, at the time, Royal British Legion, okay, I had no idea they would help find me a flat. So as it happened, I actually had a conversation with a local charity in the Blackpool area that basically found me an apartment. It wasn't the nicest, it wasn't best, but between living in a tent and living in a building, I know which one I'm going to take all day long. So I ended up moving into this somewhat scruffy apartment, but the Royal British Legion stepped in and said, right, what we can do is we'll pay for you to go and do your personal training qualification, and we'll pay for you to go to Manchester and back. How long's the course for? I said it's about 4 or 5 months. Yeah, fine, sorted. So they paid for me to go and do my personal training qualification. I then set up my own business in the local gym. Then what happened was the work dried up. In the Blackpool area where I was living, in a square mile, I think there's about 12 to 14 gyms. They were all getting flooded by young 18, 19-year-olds who were just leaving sixth form. And basically what happened was, again, I hit on hard times. Couldn't pay me council tax, couldn't pay me rent, couldn't pay the bills. So I thought, okay, I wonder if they'll help me. So I phoned them up. Lo and behold, they sent another caseworker, saw that I had no food, and straight away, they got me food, they got me bills, sorted out for 3 months. And I was like, this is amazing, that's brilliant. They said, well, what else do you want to do? I said, well, I've just got back into a program called Step Back into Health, which again was courtesy of Veterans Gateway and RBL partnership. So I'm now working at the local hospital. And it was thanks to the Royal British Legion that they actually allowed me to get on this course. Now at the time, this course was in Blackburn. And what happened then was they turned around and said, well, hang on a minute, you're living about 1.5 miles away from Blackpool Victoria Hospital. Why are you travelling to Blackburn? I've got a contact with the military liaison team. We can get you in at Blackpool. So that's what they did. Obviously then COVID then struck, and my nursing studies got put on hold, and needless to say, the whole world stopped as we know. And basically, I was with the rapid reaction team in the emergency department. So if you got COVID, I was the first person that you would come across who would be doing all your observations. Needless to say, then what happened was, the bank was dried up. And then again, I had to contact Royal British Legion to say, look, you know, I'm having real problems working at this hospital at the moment because the bank hours are drying up. There's so many people that are short of work. Can you help? Again, they were there for me. So I then decided to take 2 years away from my studying to get over COVID and to sort of recalibrate as to where I was going in my medical career. I then realised I miss nursing. I've fallen in love with nursing. It's what I'm really incredibly passionate about. So then I spoke to the university, told them I wanted to come back, and then spoke to the Royal British Legion, who again were there for the support and the moral support and counselling, because it also turned out I was also diagnosed with CPTSD, which is the complex variant. That means there's multiple incidents that took place to get me to the stage of PTSD. So they supplied support in that respect. You saw in the video earlier as well about war pensions have helped me with that as well. And they've been an absolute mainstay of help and support for me throughout my entire life. So that's why I've decided to give back in a big, big way. what I've decided to do is do a lot of running for them. 2 weeks ago, I was one of those crazy lot who decided it was a great idea to pound the streets of London, where I then was one of the lucky recipients of this fine medal. And it was not about the time. I had to stop along the way and help a lady who sadly had tripped up, fell and banged her head, and unfortunately went into hematological shock. So I had to stay on the scene for an hour until London Ambulance turned up to help support. However, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, I helped an individual and they're now safe. The other thing that I was a recipient of was the official Guinness World Record. Now, this basically is to say that I was one of the thousands of finishers. In fact, there was actually 56,640, which is an official world record for the most amount of finishers at any one marathon. Turns out then, I found out that I'm actually a double world record holder recently. In fact, technically triple if you think about it, because they've also just broken the world record for the most amount of applicants to a single marathon of over 1.1 million for London Marathon next year. I'm one of the crazy lot who decided it was a good idea to glutton for punishment and put myself forward for that. I've also found out that I was part of the largest amount of mass people that actually started a marathon as well. So I've raised so far just short of £2,000, but that's just a drop in the ocean to where I'm going. So I've just been picked up for the Berlin Marathon, and I'm going to be doing that. One of the things that I'm going to be doing is the 6 world marathons, which are the 6 major marathons around the world: Tokyo, Boston, Chicago, New York, London, and Paris. That is part and parcel of the second phase. The third and final phase is called the World Race. Now, it turns out at the moment I'm one of only 60 people globally, no hyperbole. I'm the only person in Great Britain at this minute in time to actually be doing this. I say at this minute in time because the opening is still not there yet. I think it shuts down for 2027, mid-2026. And what is happening is I'm going to be even more crazier than the London Marathon and do 7 marathons in 7 days across 7 continents. And that, yes, that includes Antarctica. And yeah, so when I say it's quite cool, quite literally. So I've just been told by the Royal British Legion that I'm now going to be raising funds for them. And basically that is the main charity that I'm going to be doing it for. I think it's really important that for somebody who's a military veteran who they've helped, that I give back and give back in spades. I don't know if anybody saw, or you're more than welcome to see, I've got a YouTube channel. I'm not trying to plug my YouTube channel, but I did a very interesting conversation both with BBC and GB News a couple of weeks ago prior to the marathons, talking about why it is I chose RBL to help and support me. And there's a lot more data and information as well on there from the local manager of the RBL in the local Lancashire county. So that's my story. And it's a story of one that has been of hardship growing up through my teens to one of where I fell very, very low into the ground, quite literally. And if it hadn't been for the Royal British Legion and it hadn't been for their support and the support of you, ladies and gentlemen, and people that pick up poppies and buy little pins and all the sort of other things that the RBL ask you for donations from, I would be in an incredibly dark place right now. Now, one final thing I'd like to say is that with my running, I've also started using running to help others in combating against PTSD and mental health challenges. And I'm using that as a way of bringing a community together, essentially. And it seems to be, no pun intended, running away. And it is building channel. If you're interested in the channel, I'm more than happy to discuss it later. If you wish to come and have a little look at the T-shirt and medal. This time here, by the way, you need to knock 10 minutes off because back then they actually took you about 10 minutes across the start line. So that's not my official time. But if you want to come and have a chat with me about it, feel free to do so. If you want to look at my YouTube videos and things like that, again, feel free to come and have a chat. I do actually have a documentary coming out, hence why Jack is here filming today. And it's also going to be shown at the Lancashire Film Festival as well, courtesy of the University of Lancashire. and they themselves are massive supporters of the RBL and the military veterans as well. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind support. Please keep on giving if you can, and I'm opening the floor to questions if you feel the need to ask any. So thank you very much.